Watching. If you like the video, like and subscribe. All right, good afternoon. I'm Mike Elias, ASP in Florida. We are going to go over fountain equipment, backroom chillers, how to take a valve apart, how they operate, ice dispenser operation, and chiller operation, how they're supposed to work, what they're supposed to do. So I hope you enjoy the video. Thank you. So everybody probably should know this. Water on the left, syrup on the right. If you don't have a bricks cup and a separator, get one from the warehouse. They have them. So these screws right here, one's for water, one's for syrup. It says on this little metal plate right here, increase with an arrow, shows you to the right. There's a little W for water, a little S for syrup. So you will take your little separator and put it up onto the diffuser and run it for a couple seconds to get it cold, coming through cold. And then you're just going to do that to it, and they should be equal. So this is a 5-to-1 ratio. This is a 5.5-to-1 ratio. We only use the 5. We don't use the 5.5. No, everything's 5.0. So obviously that is a little weak on syrup. So we'll back that off a little. Try it again. Getting there.
Rotate left to add syrup or
left, decrease, right, increase. Right each ID, left even. Or, if you can't get enough, turn the water in to get more water. So we can try that too. Now you're pretty damn close. So what you want to do the first time you put this on is let it run for a couple seconds. 2 reasons: get it cold and to fill that tube up with syrup. And that's it. That's the extent of your brixing. Now that's a non-carb valve. On the carbonated valves, there's a flow rate, although we don't really get into that. The flow rate, carbonated water should be about 2.5 ounces per second. It's not really that important. What is important is how fast it comes out. If you have products like Dr. Pepper, root beer, they're a little bit more foamy. So if you have too fast of a flow, they're going to foam up, especially with crushed ice. Crushed ice will cause more foam than cubed ice. Cubed ice is a nice smooth cube, not a lot of sharp edges on it. Crushed ice, it's got, if you look at it closely, it's very sharp. And that'll cause agitation in the water and the syrup, and that'll cause it to foam up. So as long as you have the, as long as the flow is coming out okay on the water, then all you have to do is adjust the syrup when you're calibrating. You'll notice on this valve, this back flow control, we're going to take this off. If this one is blue, or this one is black, okay? The blue one is a newer valve, which is a high flow valve. It puts out more carbonated water. Those housings will split and crack, and they're going to leak, and you got a mess. You could put a black one on there. It's the same housing, it's just a different color to let you know that the little piston inside is a high flow piston. And we'll take that apart and show you the difference. So to calibrate carbonated, do the same thing. Let it run for a couple seconds. Spot on.
What if you keep adjusting it and it just don't get spot on? Right?
If it won't adjust, then you've got to start looking elsewhere. Syrup pressure, there could be a problem in the valve. The little banjo valves, and we'll get to that in a minute. So the way this valve works is there's a little switch right here. When you push this lever, pushes up on that micro switch, which then powers this little solenoid. And it just pulls it down. And that opens up two little paddles in there, which lets the water flow and the syrup flow. So there's going to be times when you got to take this valve off. Quite often. So in order to get this valve off, do yourself a favor and get a cup of hot water from the coffee maker or out of the sink. Or the cappuccino machine. So let's say you got a valve where there's hardly any carbonated water coming out of it. And then customers are saying, the managers say it tastes like syrup. It's all syrup. You got that thing cranked in all the way, and you just can't get enough carbonated water out of it. You're going to have to take this valve apart. So in order to get it off, it's mounted to a mounting block, which is this, which is mounted to the dispenser, and that valve attaches. This locks it in place. So in order to get this valve off, this little plastic lever here, you got to push over to your left. So you're going to push that over. Once you do that, you can push down on the top. And what that does is closes those ports off. So it shuts off the water, shuts off the syrup, and you can pop the whole valve off. So pour some hot water back there. Just dump it back there. Yep. That's low voltage. It's not going to hurt anything. So the best way to do it is just push back on that little plastic lever to the left, and then push down on the block, which is in the back. And just push down. This whole thing will come off. And that's how you get the valve off. Don't push that back up, or you're going to have water and syrup going out the front.
Well, I put it back on, and I really didn't understand how it worked. Someone had just explained to me, told me what to do, but didn't really explain to me, and that happened to me. I was trying to get it back on, and I was messing with it.
We've all done it. We've all done it. I've done it.
It was like 6 minutes. It was
Yeah.
locked and failed because you blew off the valve.
Yep. Yep. So this is your valve. So the switch, if you got a bad switch or it's sticking, you got to replace the switch. You're going to take the nozzle off. These two little tabs, you're going to just spread them apart. That'll pop off. Now, here's your switch. The switches we have, everybody should have them in their truck. You take the red wire off. The black is in there. There's a little hard to see. Little pin in there. You got to push on the metal piece, and this will come out. You just slide the new one back up in there. Yeah, let me show you.
We do carry both versions in the warehouse, by the way. The ones without the wires on it and the ones with the wires.
So the ones without the wires, we don't use. They're not for any valves that we have. They were ordered wrong, and they're still in there for some reason. So you could try and use it if you want, and it works.
It is,
great.
Yeah, it's the same switch.
Right. It is the same.
It's the same switch. It does work.
Okay. So this little tab, you can push on it, bend it over, and that'll come right out. And that's how the new switch comes, with this and this. I better bend this back. And that's how you change the switch out. New one will push right in, and it'll lock it in there. The solenoid, they can go bad too. A lot of times they stick. They get gunked up. Just pour some hot water down in there. Free it up a little.
One of the problems with those can be
just cleaning them. You know, the same with the switch too. You could just pour some hot water on the switch and blow it, and it'll work fine. So in order to get the solenoid, it just snaps in there. Try it out. Now you got the whole thing out. These things are really simple. So let's go back to where you're adjusting it. You can't get enough carbonated water out. It's too much syrup. There's nothing you can do. One of these little banjos, that's a little banjo. And what that does is it just pivots and it opens that little tab up. That's all it does. So when this thing pulls down, it's just pulling. It's just pulling on that little arm. So you got two little springs in here to push it back. No matter what you do, you can't get enough carbonated water. First thing you want to do is take that little banjo out. Take all these screws out. It might seem like a lot. You do it once or twice and it's nothing.
Or does it affect, like, what does the banjo, like, what does it affect?
What's that?
Why
The banjo, that's what I'm going to show you. Try this one. So make sure you don't lose the springs. Don't do it over a drain.
Don't do it over a drain.
Don't do it over a drain.
Don't let somebody go over the drain.
Okay. So these are your two banjos. There's one for carbonated water, one for plain water. I mean syrup, I'm sorry. And they just open and close. So you've got all the water pressure on the back of that. When you open it, it allows it through. So years ago, they changed to a white, I think it's neoprene, I'm not sure. Just put the black one in. They don't even make these anymore. So what happens, if you look, you can see that centerpiece. See how much bigger that centerpiece is than that one? It's swollen. It has swollen up. So as it swells up, it lets less and less water through. So once it gets so swollen, it can only open so far. There's nothing you're going to be able to do. Just put another one. Put a black one in.
Put a black one in?
Well, I'm going to put a black one in. Yep.
So it doesn't really matter what color.
We only have the black one.
Okay.
So this was a Coca-Cola thing that they tried a different to prevent it from swelling up. Something with the carbonated water makes them swell up. Because the syrup, you'll never see it swell up. It's just on the carbonated water.
So it doesn't matter what color, white or black, it doesn't
Doesn't matter. All we have are the black ones. These you can't even get anymore. They were put in for years and it didn't solve the issue, so they went back to the black ones. So when you see one off swelling up like that, that's your problem. So then we'll put it back together. It's real easy to change that out. It doesn't matter. Either you can put it either direction. Okay, now I'll get these springs back on. There's a little tab in there that one end of the spring goes in, and then that spring locks onto the little banjo. So if everybody has their par level on their truck right, you only have one of those. So if it goes flying, you only got one, so be careful when you put it back in there. So that is the only thing that opens and closes and lets the water and the syrup through. Sometimes it's dripping water or it's dripping syrup. That's what you want to look for, because that's the only thing that starts and stops the flow. Okay, now, if you still can't get enough, there could be a problem in the flow control. This is your flow control. That comes out, you take this out on the back. That comes out, this whole thing will pull out. Okay? That's your flow control. Now you can take each one apart. Don't have to do this that often, but in case you do, here's how you do it. Okay, you're going to pull this out. It's got a spring, adjustment screw, spring. Look, there's a piece of junk in there. So that can get caught in there, and it's either going to flow too much or not enough. So that is a piece of carbon from a recirculator pump that has failed. Okay. Anyway, there's your piston, and then the sleeve. The sleeve sits in there. It's got little holes in the top. Yes, sir. This hole in the bottom of that piston is bigger than the one for the syrup. So don't mix them up.
See that?
If you put it the other way around, you put that small one on the water and the big one on the syrup, you're going to have no water and all syrup. So the big one goes on the water. And the way this works, there are two ceramic pieces, so it just slides back and forth. Real nice and easy, nice and smooth. And it blocks those little holes on the top. And it will only allow so much through according to how much tension you have on that spring. And that's how you adjust your flow and it allows that little piston to move up or down more or less, blocking those holes. So all you gotta do is take it apart, make sure there's nothing in it, put it back together, and you're good to go. Just remember, the larger hole on the piston for the water and the small one for the seal.
It will happen, guys. You guys will be in a hurry. You'll take it apart, put it back together again. You're like, it's not going to bridge right. It's like, what the hell do I do? What you just talked about with the flow control, the piston, that it's important that those are in the right direction. Also, what's also important, don't drop it, because it will crack. It's ceramic.
We don't have them in our truck, but I think they're in the warehouse if you need one. These little O-rings are in there also. The little red O-rings.
Yeah, you can take those too, right?
You can change them. Normally you don't have to, unless one's torn or it's leaking, and you put them all on, replace them all.
Is the O-ring also?
Yeah. Make sure you get that little piston in the fork. Two little tabs on the back block. Mount up with these two little tabs. And that's it. So we're going to put this valve back in. You're just going to do the opposite. But make sure you got it. It'll go in just nice and easy. Make sure you got it in there square and straight, and just push up on that bottom piece. And you'll hear that lever click back over. Now it's locked back in. So now we'll check the bricks. Pretty strong. Looks like it's empty. Sure, it's empty. Or the connector's not on right. Dr. Pepper. Let me go look. And then you actually have the nozzle. The syrup comes down the center. There's 4 little holes, so when that syrup comes out, it sprays out those 4 little holes. The water comes down through all these different little diffusers just to kind of spread it all out. And it'll mix in there. You can take these out and clean them. Take the spray hose in the back. It'll clean them out. Carbonated water nozzles don't get that dirty usually because the bubbles in the carbonated water kind of is like self-cleaning. But these, they will get dirty. So you just spray it out with a hose with the sprayer in the back, and it'll clean it up. But what this is going on is that little nozzle. That's what you're actually connecting that to. And that separates, obviously, the syrup and the water. Yes. Well, there were some that came through that were wrong. They were white, and they didn't have the little holes on the end. So you put it on up in there, you didn't get any syrup out of it. So there was no way to adjust it. Those are meant actually for like tea, iced tea, where it doesn't really need to mix that much. So we had a bad batch of those. We got the wrong ones in. If you put them on carbonated, it's going to come out like milk. It's going to, when you dispense it, it's going to, you immediately know you got a white one on there. Put it on a non-carb, a plain water valve, and you'll never notice the difference if you don't have a black one. Yeah. So yeah, I guess they ordered them on Supply Track, and Supply Track had the white ones, and we had a rash of calls as to why it's foaming, because the syrup and the water mixed directly, and that's what caused it. So if you see a white one, put it over on one of the valves that's not carbonated, because it's not going to foam. There's nothing to foam. You can do that if you want.
I don't want to do
So remember, run it first, because you got to fill that tube up with syrup.
So how long do you run it?
Couple seconds. That's it. It's going to stop, and you don't know where you had it set. So when they get product in, now you're going to have to come back and adjust that. So this isn't something we normally do on a regular basis. You're not going to come and calibrate them all. If you repair something to it, like change something in the flow control or the little banjo, then you're going to want to check the bricks. The other time will be when they have a complaint. You know, customers are complaining the Mountain Dew tastes horrible. Okay, that's the first thing you're going to check is if it's way off, then that's why.
They don't generally fall out of calibration just from being used.
No, so it should never change calibration unless something else changes. If they bump the CO2 pressure from 60 to 100, that's going to change everything. And if you find they're all off, then now you got to look somewhere else, because not all of these things are off. So 9 times out of 10, they're going to complain that something's not tasting right. That's the first thing you're going to check. So now that bib was empty, you want to check another one? And the black one is the piston on the water. If you look, it's got a little slot. I don't know if you can see it. There's a little slot in the top of that. See that? See that? See that little slot?
Yeah.
All right. So that's going to let a little bit more water through than normal. So that's going to make it a high flow valve. That's the only difference. That's it. Do we need to replace, if this breaks, do we need to put it back in? Put a regular one. Doesn't matter.
What was the purpose of that?
Oh, no. I broke it. There you go. There you go. Anybody have one of those on their truck? I don't. In these blocks, all these individual lines go up to these valves. Okay? So you've got all these lines coming off the front, but all the ones in the back, which you can't see, have plugs in them. So that's how you can change this valve from plain water to carbonated water. You can change probably all of them. Normally, we don't do that. If they have a fountain reset, which we got one coming up, we're going to have a company come in and do that. But in case you need to, you want to make sure you depressurize the water to this fountain and the carbonated water. And we'll get into that when we get back to the chiller. But you want to make sure there's no pressure in the water or carbonated water. And what you can do is take these two screws out, and that plate has fingers on it, and it's holding those fittings down into place. Take that plate out, and you're just going to swap the plug and move that line in the back and put the plug in the front. And that's all it is, because over here you have a water line and a carbonated water line coming into this. The front's the water, the back is the carbonated water. They're all plugged because we don't have any carbonated water valves on this fountain. So all you got to do is move them. Put that plate back in, fire it back up, and now this will be carbonated, whichever one. So the way the cold plate works, you got your plain water, carbonated water coming in, and all the syrups come in, and they coil around internally in that cold plate, and all the syrups come out from behind here and go up onto the valve. All the water comes out in the front and goes up on the valve. Years ago, they decided to put Tetley tea on these fountains. Well, the syrup itself was like molasses. When it hit that 32-degree cold plate, it turned into tar, and it just solidified. And it blocked that cold plate up, and they had to bypass them, and the Tetley tea went away pretty quick. So that's how the cold plate works. All this stuff goes in, the ice laying on it keeps it cold. That aluminum block in there is really, really thick. Just a little bit of ice on that, there's going to be a lot of heat transfer. It'll keep it pretty cold. Some of the crushed, when you get a cold plate where it's crushed ice, you get a complaint that the drinks taste flat. They just don't, they're not quite right. You look, everything's fine. Your toothbrush is fine, syrup's fine, ice is fine. Take the cover off that cold plate, there's no ice on it. And that's because it's got so much lime scale built up on it that the ice can't slide down onto that plate. So you got to go in there and scrape it off and scoop it out. You hit that dispenser, and now you see all the ice sliding down on the plate. So that happens more with the crushed because of the lime scale that comes out with the ice. As it melts, it gets stuck on that plate. You'll see some of it. It's that thick. So that's something to check when you're down in there. Just look at it. If it's blocked up, get in there with a scraper and scrape it out.
How much do you think we should check this with general maintenance?
That's all you'll be doing. You'll drive yourself crazy.
So just wait until we have something going on?
Unless they have something in a PM program to do that, or if you have a specific complaint like that, like, hey, they taste a little flat sometimes, and you see it, then clean it. If you have another crushed ice machine over here, check that one too while you're at it. The cubed isn't usually an issue. Just because of the way the cubed ice is made, after every cycle, it dumps out all the water, so it really doesn't build up. That's why those cubes come out so clear. There's nothing in them. If you fill your tray up at home with water and put it in your freezer, they're white. They taste horrible. That's all the impurities in the water. These are clear, You take that ice and melt it and test it. Probably pure, just because of the way the ice is made. You can put red dye in that ice maker, the cuber, not the crust. That ice is going to come out clear. It's just the way the ice is made, right? Okay. All right, so that's how you can change plain water to carbonated water, and that's your cold plate. When you hit your dispense switch, which is behind this lever, it's right behind there, that dispense switch is either not going to work or it's going to stick. And they're going to have a cup over it because it just keeps dispensing. And that auger just keeps turning in there and turning. It's going to overheat. The dispense switch is easy to replace. Right. It's easier to get these two screws out from behind there, but you ain't ever going to get them out. They're rusted in. Don't even bother. Just try and get... I should have brought one in with me. It's got a rubber cover over the switch. It's just a push button. Once you get that nut off, it comes out. Take two wires off, put them back on, slide it back on, and get that nut back on, tighten it down, and you're good to go.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you got to unplug it. You got to unplug it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You want to unplug it.
Good spirit, please don't look. I'm just saying.
Okay. So your auger motor that dispense switch operates, when you hit that switch, it's going to start turning all that ice in there, and it's going to open up the gate. That auger motor will sometimes fail, or it's going to make such a loud grinding noise that they can't stand it. Believe it or not, that motor comes out real easy sometimes. So, so what you have to do if you have to change that is get all the ice out. And there's a little wing nut on the top of the auger bar that's in there. Take that off, and you can wiggle that bar off the shaft of the motor. It's splined. So underneath here is a U-bolt with a wing nut. You know what? Stop that. Give me a minute. Okay, auger motor. This is the older auger motor. This bracket is mounted up in underneath here, and it has a wing nut on. You take that wing nut off, and you can pull this out, and that just holds that motor in place. That's all it does. So in order to get this out, it's mounted up in there like this. These 4 pins, and not one pin, is what it mounts to. There's 4 slotted holes up in there. You back it this way and drop it out, and the whole thing comes right out. It'll come right out through here without having to move anything. It's amazing. But it does. It comes right out. Yeah, unplug the fountain, obviously. Obviously. So, if you ever go to a fountain that's not spinning, it won't agitate, and you have an old gray motor in there, there's a little overload right there that'll trip. If you got cubed ice that's making slabs, and it gets caught in there, that little overload's going to trip and it's going to pop out. Before you order another motor and check it, because you'll have power coming to this motor, but it ain't working, and you think the motor's there. Push that button back in and probably start up. The new motors do not. The little skinny black motor does not have a reset on it, but these do. So that's how quarter turn, drop it out, put it back in the same way, quarter turn, and then put the loop on, little wing nut, that's it, that's all that holds it in place. So now your cold plate drains are right here. They will block up. You're going to have a fountain that's leaking, and you're going to see it coming out of here. That means that cold plate drain is blocked. You can see you get lime scale, gunk, whatever in there. It'll block it up. So luckily it's right here at the drain, so you can run a brush and let it run right out. Once you hook these back on, do yourself a favor and put a wire tie around it, because they'll leak without it. Okay, this is your ice gate, which slides up and down. When you hit the dispenser, turns the auger motor and opens that arm. These things will fail. We have these. You can replace it. This is a little restrictor that slides up and down. If you get too much ice coming out or not enough, you can open it or close it. Okay. This is a little ballast for the light. Obviously, that's the starter. Transformer for all the valves. And this is your timer board. So what that timer board does is agitate every so often to keep that ice from building up. Overnight, nobody uses it. All that cubed ice will freeze together. This keeps it agitated. You can adjust these little timers. So, cubed ice, you want it to run probably maximum amount of time, on time, and minimum off time. However, on the crushed, you want it the opposite. If you have a crushed ice machine, you want to adjust that timer. So it just goes, and that's it. You want to keep it on time at a minimum, on time minimum, off time maximum.
You gotta learn this.
Come on.
All right, I get it.
You got what you need? All right.
That's on the crushed ice, you're saying, right?
That's on the crushed ice. So the reason we do that with crushed ice, if anybody here is from the north, you know how to make a snowball. All right? So the crushed ice is real soft. If it sits in there and just keeps spinning, you're doing this. You're making a snowball out of it. And that whole thing is just going to spin as a big cone, and it won't dispense out. So that's one thing you want to do to keep that at a minimum. So once again, keep crushed ice, minimum on time, maximum off time on that time.
And the opposite on the cube, right?
Opposite on the cube. So in your ice chute, that's your gate, and of course that's where all the ice comes out. On the crushed ice, it needs to have a restrictor plate put in that chute. So you see it has that little arm vent which sticks in to that dispenser just a little bit. So what that does is as that crushed ice comes around, it hits this plate and shoots it out the chute. If you have a crushed ice machine that doesn't have one of these on it, it's probably just going to keep falling up or it won't dispense. So what you have to do is take that chute off. Take the chute off. Yeah, it comes a little to the caulking. You're going to caulk it and then put that against the dispenser and then put the gasket and the chute over top of it. We don't have these in the warehouse. Can order them from equipment through Cornelius. Most of the time, there's one on there. Most of the time, if they're replacing a crushed ice machine, it's already on there. But if they're taking a cubed machine off and putting a crushed machine on, who's ever doing that installation should know this has to go on. The timer needs to be adjusted. And then the thermostat, they have to mount a thermostat up in there a different way. That's added, but it comes with the kit. So the whole idea with the crushed ice, where it's balling up and you're making a snowball, is because of the weight of all that crushed ice in there. If you let it fill up all the way to the top, you let it fill all the way up to the top where these sensors are on that crushed machine. There's one in the front, one in the back. Once the ice gets up that far, it blocks those sensors and it shuts the machine off. If you let it build up that far, you got way too much ice in there. There's too much weight. So that extra thermostat is put in there to lower that level of ice in there. So there's not so much weight, so it won't ball up. Pardon? Like 3/4, up to where the little angled plate is in here. Right, like even with that is where you want it to stop. So if you all the way up. So that curtain, that'll go all the way up until that curtain stays open, and that'll shut it off. So when they put that machine in, 3 things: thermostat to lower the ice, diverter plate, and a timer. Those are the 3 things to keep the crushed ice from balling up. That's it on the fountain. Any questions? Any comments? Any questions on the fountain, on the ice? What's that? It has little numbers on it, but you don't really need to set it. You're either going to turn it all the way up or all the way down. Yeah, there's little numbers on it. Did you brought that up? Because in the instructions that come with that plate, it'll show you the timer. Locate the timer board, reset timer to a half a second on and 3 hours off, which is minimum and maximum.
Every 3 hours it moves for half a second.
Every 3 hours it just goes, because you can't disable it. So you're probably all aware everybody wants crushed ice. It's used more than anything. That's why we usually have 2 crushed machines and 1 cube.
That board goes bad most of the time.
When that board goes bad, well, either it's not going to agitate or the gate won't open. What you'll see, glad you brought that up. You'll see a little dark burn mark on there. If you see a burn mark on that, anywhere on that timer, if you see a little burn mark, timer's bad, put a new one in. Put a new timer in, as soon as you turn it on, it's gonna short out. Something caused that. It's normally this
Yep, that happened to me once.
that has shorted out, which in turn shorts that out. Usually that's the cause. But if it's burned out, don't just replace it. Find out what caused it to burn out. Yeah, me too, many times. And I've put a new timer in, and it popped. Yep.
Go ahead,
Yep.
Yeah, that's usually
3 screws. 1, 2, 3.
pop it out, that's it.
That screw, these 2. It'll come out. There's a little connector right here.
I've also had it where the gate was sticking open, and I replaced the gate motor. I couldn't figure out why it wouldn't stop sticking open. I cleaned everything. It ended up being the switch. No, where you're bolted down, the squeeze and pressure
Against
the
it.
gate, so it had enough power to open, and it uses gravity to fall, and it was just sticking open.
Yeah.
It'll be that switch still.
Yeah, you always gotta just search, look, you'll find it. Yep.
It's one thing.
Yep. Yeah. Well, that slide, sometimes this little, it'll warp a little bit. And then this just gets, you'll feel it catching. You can't see any reason why, but you could take it and bend it a little and put it back in. It works perfect. Do what you got to do. Lesson 2. We get them at Home Depot. Starters. Always change the starter when you change the bulb.
They have Home Depot too. But you got the starter. Always change the starter. The starters are in the light section.
Yeah, they're in another area. Okay, any questions on the fountain? We're going to take a little break and then move into the back room. So if you have a question, now's the time.